Hello, everyone, and welcome to this PEER Chain and Sprockets webinar. My name is Richard Hadden, and I'll be your host today. I'm an author and professional speaker focusing on leadership and creating great workplace cultures, which is, of course, what the Spungen family has done over many decades. I'm a friend and admirer of the company, and it was my pleasure to moderate the third webinar in this series in April when we met PEER Chain's president, Drew Beadle, and his leadership team. Today, we're going to be talking about an important topic that's been on the minds and lips of so many people since the start of this year, the global trade wars and tariffs. And it's PEER's goal to educate you, their customers, and others in their network about what's going on in this realm so that you can protect yourselves as much as possible and make the right decisions. We're joined today by Drew Beadle, president of PEER Chain and Sprockets, and Kevin Shrout, PEER's VP of Sales. And our special guest today is John Gurley, an attorney with the firm of ArentFox Schiff. John is a leading voice in the law around trade and tariffs. And we'll welcome two other special guests at the end of the webinar. We really do want to hear from you, the members of the live audience. So we're going to ask you to please enter any questions that you might have in the chat box. PEER's marketing department will be monitoring that chat box. So please, if you have any questions, enter them in the chat box and we'll address as many as we can at the end during our Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So I'd like to kick things off with a question for you, Drew, okay? I mean, tariffs are not new, right? But clearly we're in a different environment with respect to tariffs now. I mean, the volatility, the unpredictability, and really just the tariff rates themselves are causing a lot of anxiety and uncertainty for anybody who's involved in an international trade. And that goes all the way down to consumers who buy so many things that are impacted by international trade. So my question is, when did you at PEER begin to sense that the tariff situation was going to be more intense? And what did you do to begin to protect PEER and your customers from the effects that those tariffs would have?
Yeah, Richard, that's a great question. The tariffs for us really didn't start during inauguration. It was really, actually, we want to roll back all the way to the campaign trail when the presidents or the two candidates were running and all the social media and posts and things that were released. It was a lot for us to handle. So this goes all the way back to really June of 2024. It brings back all the memories, but all the things that we tried to do in our as a company to help mitigate or challenge the risks started with how we handled our inventory. We really started looking back at our sourcing strategy as well as with the supply chain and what other options we had to bring to our customers to help lessen the impact. Of course, at the inauguration, when that happened, it quickly changed and rolled, and then we're 6 months later, here we are in our current state. So I'm going to bring in Kevin to really give us the insight of how our customers felt this and what we're doing for them.
Yeah. Right. So our customer base began to be notified as early as May. We took an agnostic approach to who might win the election and what the outcomes might be, but we knew there would be continued uncertainty. And we wanted to make sure that our customers had awareness and the ability to plan for that uncertainty by reflecting on their supply chain, understanding what their demands were likely to be through Q3, 4, and Q1 of 2025. And in June, we began an active outreach to our customers concerning their blanket orders and any possible disruptions that we might see in the supply chain. It's been an ongoing process through the end of the year. And as Drew mentioned, after the inauguration, we knew things were going to move more decidedly in one direction. And we really ramped up communication at that point to our customers proactively.
And then one of the questions we have always had, and we got John here, so we got to take advantage of his time. John, when did you pay attention to all these tariffs? Oh, John's on mute.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. First off, I want to thank the Spungens. My daughter is 31 years old, and I've known Danny and Glenn longer than my daughter, which says something about my work with the Spungen family. I've been looking at tariffs and trade for my entire career, and like a lot of Washington trade lawyers, I'm pretty jaded at this juncture. it's pretty hard to surprise me. But what's happened has surprised me and most of my colleagues here in Washington. Of course, after seeing President Trump in Trump 1.0, we knew that he was a bit unpredictable. He's the one who put on pretty big 301 duties and 232 duties. But during the campaign, he focused somewhat on that, but he was more focused on immigration. But we began worrying about it because when we saw the same cast of characters was going to appear in Trump 2.0 as 1.0. Bob Lighthizer, who was his former USTR, was heavily involved in the campaign. Peter Navarro, even though he was in jail, was widely known to be going to go to the White House. And so we became especially worried when we found out really Mr. Navarro really was going to be such an important part. And we started gearing up here as well to track his changes. But even we were surprised by the volume and the volatility of all these changes.
Wow. Thanks, John. And with a lot of your support, I know that the tariffs are ever so changing. A new social media, a tweet, whatever. It's really hard. We require and lean on your team a lot to help us understand and make sure we're up to date. I know with your help, we follow the Section 301, which that's from Trump 1.0, as you said, the Section 232, the IEPA, which is the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, and then finally these reciprocal tariffs. These are the sections that we handle. So it's a lot of changing information. There's a lot going on. How do you keep up to date, and how do you stay front of the edge to give us the best and most accurate information?
Well, sadly, some of the things we monitor most are Truth Social, because that's sometimes where the news is announced. But I view a Truth Social post as just a warning shot that we should be looking for something more official. What we track the White House press office page, where they have fact sheets and presidential proclamations and presidential executive actions. And that's where that's where you really know a change is going to be made. At the same time, after that is done, we follow customs messages that are sent to all the ports that indicate what the tariffs are going to be. We have an internal tracker that we have a couple of different people assigned to it because it's so difficult and complicated. Like a lot of many companies that are importers have access to what is called ACE, which is really their ability to go online and determine what the duty rate is at any time for any product they're bringing in. We also go on ACE to confirm that our own analysis is fine. And then finally, we look at the International Trade Commission's harmonized tariff code, which will be a little bit behind, but it will eventually catch up. So the answer is we look at a lot of different things, and we try to be very careful, but once in a while we make a mistake. So that's why we're constantly double checking.
Interesting. So John, those were, and I appreciate the explanation of some of those various codes. For those of us who are not as well versed in this as you, John, those are the sections that PEER pays attention to, the ones that you just talked about. Is this, or are there more tariff changes for other kinds of commodities? Are there other things on their way?
Well, there's always rumors that there could be additional trade actions under different obscure provisions of the law. The IEPA is one that had not been used, I think, since the 1950s by Harry Truman. It is. We'll talk a little bit later about whether that's a lawful use. There's other provisions that he's mentioned, including currency manipulation, which you can go to a particular country and say, we think you're manipulating the currency. There's also the ever-present threat, of course, and the Spungans know this well, of anti-dumping and countervailing duty cases being filed. But those are the basic duties and tariffs they're going to be facing. Donald Trump has been very creative about using the entire toolbox. He's got a few more tools in there if these get struck down by the court.
I see. And the tariffs really are hitting just about every sector in the economy, aren't they?
There are just a very few exceptions. Because of the COVID crisis, we do have some exclusions from China coming out, which like masks and things like this. But that's really like 1% of the products as opposed to the majority.
I see. Okay. Kevin, I know you've been getting a lot of questions and you've been watching the news and following all of this. But how does this feel on a day-to-day basis for you and for your customers?
Yeah, I'm going to call it chaos.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you're cooking popcorn on your stove and you take the lid off and it just starts flying everywhere. John's team takes a really methodical view unfortunately, the news cycle doesn't support that level of rigor. So our customers are bombarded by headlines and news flashes, and they're trying to do the best thing that they can for their business. So oftentimes we're just getting a lot of questions around, hey, I heard a tariff shift. Can you ship my order now, or can I get it going now? And that being able to track back to John's data and provide our customers solid information has been really what's been a salvation for us, because we can inform them of the impact of the sourcing decisions.
Yeah, you really have to be able to make fast decisions based on the latest information, and the latest information is changing all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about something for a few minutes that we've labeled as fair and balanced trade. And I think, Drew, you were going to talk with John about this and about PEER's position in this.
Yeah, the like we talked about earlier, we spend a lot of time working with John and his team about all of this type of stuff. What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? Because there's a great impact on our customers if we make a mistake, and even on our company and how we do business. So we do a lot with of the analysis of the country of origin on the front side of this, right? And again, I talked about our supply chain and how we engage on that. We really want to make sure that the product we import in the United States is correct, coded correctly. We understand the tariffs, and this is all information that we need to know beforehand, right? So what I got a great question for John on is how are other companies handling the tariff mitigation strategies apart from knowing how we handle our business at PEER?
All of them are having a lot of trouble, because if you're trying to make a long-term decision, it's hard to do that knowing that the rates that are existent now could be reduced or increased. I mean, just yesterday you saw that Brazil was given a 50% reciprocal rate, which was like because he doesn't like because Trump doesn't like what's happening to their former president. That's really hard to predict. But we started out our analysis on the theory that a lot of people have been invested and have been importing from China for a long time. And China's fate is not going to be good no matter what happens under Trump. It's still going to be difficult because of the 301 and other possible volatile duty increases. So a lot of our work has been to help people decide how can they get out of China either completely or partially. And getting out of China partially is the tricky issue about determining what is substantial transformation. A lot of companies want to do partial processing in China and then do the final processing in a third country. Then the trick is, what is enough? And right now, customs is being very aggressive. They know that people are trying to do this. So if they see a shift in country of your product, your import specialist, they're likely to send you a little notice asking you for information about what your product is, where it came from, and the steps it's taken. You see a slide up there called substantial transformation. It is one of the key issues that companies have to face, because it's not a linear or it's not a percentage test. There's a totality of circumstances is decide what is substantial transformation. And substantial transformation really it involves, you look at the character, the name, and the use of the good. You do look at the value added, but it is not dispositive. And so what we do is try to go through there and look at what they're doing. We look at past customs cases, because a lot of companies have been doing this for 50 years, trying to figure out what the right classification is. So there's on the customs website something called CROSS, which is a database of all the customs rulings. So we help the company go step by step to determine what they are doing is correct, and then decide if the business risk is acceptable by moving part of their production process to a third country. Some companies do want to have certainty, and that is an issue that is hard to give them. What we recommend sometimes is that if they hold their hand up and go, customs, we want to make sure that we're doing what's correct. Sometimes we view that as a mistake, because customs will have their spotlight right on you. And right now, customs is very busy, and so sending in a ruling request may not even get you a ruling very fast. Oftentimes, we say the best way to do it is to make your best guess you can, have a lawyer write you a comfort letter that says what we think you're doing is reasonable. And the reason that's important, if customs challenges you later, if you've had somebody review and to give you a letter that says we think what you're doing is reasonable, then the possibility of being found for a penalty such as negligence or gross negligence, which can be 20% addition in dues or 40% of the value. So that is what we're trying to do. It's very hard for anybody, and we don't. We have been doing this a long time, and yet we find it difficult to know exactly how aggressive customs is going to be. But that's the advice we're giving, and we do the best we can to make it simple for the customer. You see right here at the latest slide, you can sort of the last thing about writing about the CBP is that really the last little line there is you need to exercise reasonable care. And we recommend to most companies that to do that, they really need to have somebody in-house take the lead in being the, let's say, the trade specialist or the trade compliance officer, so that if customs asks you, say, yes, we have somebody in charge, and we use outside counsel to help us. A few examples of what is not substantial transformation, and believe it or not, we get some crazy questions where people say, hi, I'm in Thailand. If I ship this to Mexico and then ship it from Mexico, can I call it Mexican then? Well, of course you can't. The country of origin sticks with the product no matter where it's shipped, no matter how many transshipments you have. When you can see some good examples of what is not substantial transformation are the packaging and repackaging or just mere assembly or mixing and dilution or putting in kits. So when you're looking at the country of origin of substantial transformation, you need to take a deep dive, especially if it's a big economic investment for your company.
So really look at that carefully, because they're going to be taking a pretty aggressive look at it.
So, John, we hear a lot of this term of tariff mitigation based around transshipping. Is that a viable strategy for enterprises right now? Or?
Well, transshipping is there's nothing illegal with the word transship, but you got to make sure you're using the same country of origin no matter where you ship it. And every day, customs is going after companies for saying it's Thailand when in reality the product is Chinese. And just so you know, if an importer brings that in and knowingly does it, it's not just a penalty, it's a felony. And they can go after you not only for the fraud, which is the total value of the product, but also institute a criminal investigation against you. It doesn't happen that often, but it happens enough where everybody should be very, very careful. And especially if you're getting into millions and millions of dollars, they do not hesitate to at least make you pay the fraudulent penalties. But again, if I'm a corporate officer or somebody in the logistics department, I'm not in the business of trying to get a felony record, trying to save a little money.
No, you're absolutely right. Those are great things to consider, because I've heard that question before. Oh, just send it into Canada. It won't be a problem. That's how we'll get around. No, we've got a business to run here. We've got customers to uphold. We can't just drop it into Canada. There's a lot more to that. We've got to consider all our other customers that we handle. You're exactly right. The 5 years back payment. I mean, that especially when you're talking about, I think we had on our list for chains right now to certain countries, you're paying 95% tariff on the cost of goods. That can put us out of business. And that goes into when we really started this, reactivated our conversation. I know you've been working with the Spungans for years, but when Andrew Hong and I really started engaging with you last year, I know you had to be frustrated by the number of times we say, John, come on, country of origin. It's simple. You just take the assembly cost, you put it in. It's more than the actual cost of the product. It's country XYZ. I know you got into this, but really, why is it so hard to study and figure out what the true country of origin is of a product?
I think the customs has made it difficult, but the reality is the production process differs for every product. So you could have something valuable being put in a product in country Y, but the reality is that may just be a simple change to the product. When in reality, even if it's 50%, if most of the work in the sophisticated production processes in the country A, then the customs is going to say it's probably going to be country of origin A. So the reason is it would be easy, and it is possible sometimes under USMCA or countries where we have free trade agreements, the rules are a bit more clear. There's tariff classifications and there is some value added. But for the vast majority of the world, it's like every time you do something, it's a new test every time. The test is the same, but when you plug in the facts to that test, it's going to be very difficult to make a prediction based upon what happened for another product in another country. It's just tough. I guess it's a gift for lawyers, probably from Congress. We appreciate
it. Well, John, I'm wondering, thinking about the courts and challenges and so forth, are there professional associations, trade associations that are getting involved in this and that are challenging some of this legislation in the courts?
Yes, I will tell you there has been, as you all know, whatever your politics are, there is a level of intimidation right now against law firms for going after Trump and his administration on things that are sensitive to him. Trade is rubbing up against that level. There have been certain private litigators, private companies have filed suits, but some usually they're just sort of like almost like guinea pigs in a way. But we've had big companies like big organizations like the Chamber of Commerce, which have been filing what are called amicus briefs, which are friends of the court. So there are a lot of challenges out there, especially on these IEPA, because it is such a novel use of U.S. law. Right now, there's several IEPA cases. There's tend to be funneling into a special federal court in Washington, D.C., which handles trade cases. We expect a decision on the IEPA, the initial decision, to come out sometime, I think, this fall. What we don't know, however, is what the Supreme Court's going to do. I think ultimately, whatever happens here, they're probably going to let these duties stay in place until the Supreme Court makes a decision. And traditionally, most Supreme Courts, when a president says something about national security, they tend to give them lots of deference. The court that handles the appellate court that has handled these cases has also taken that view. So I am not super optimistic that this Supreme Court, as currently constituted, will overrule these duties because of the broad leeway given when somebody says the word national security.
So it sounds like what I've observed sounds like what you're saying. It seems like a lot of things are challenged in the lower courts, and those challenges are go through, and that might give us a little bit of a false sense of security because so often those cases then get to a higher court, and in the appeals process, the lower court decisions are overturned. Is what I'm seeing what you're seeing?
Yeah, exactly right. That's exactly right. And this has not always been the way it works. The Supreme Court has always given the president some deference, but the deference to say this is an economic emergency because we have a currency, because we have a trade imbalance, especially with certain countries which have a trade deficit with us. It seems a little bit odd that this would be allowed to be legal, but I think that this Supreme Court looks at the long term. They want the president to have authority to take immediate action without having the shackles on him, which would restrain him from doing something that really might help the United States. There's another court case out there involving Section 301. I think that has a much higher likelihood of being successful because just procedurally it was so badly done. The underlying court said it was illegal, and I think that coming up, they're going to find that in the Court of Appeals that there's a good chance I think they'll find that some of these were illegal. But again, it also depends on whether you're going to depends on which judges you get at the court, right? So.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I just
saying that
it turns out the CIT did rule in favor of the government, but again, it always going to go to the higher court, and you get 3 judges there, and it's by like a lottery system. So some of the judges are very reasonable, some of them are very protectionist, some of them tend to be more moderate. So we can't depend on any of these going away, but of them all, I think the 301 has the best chance, actually.
And if the cases are successful, are those the only things that we should be concerned about or be looking at on the horizon? Are there other things that may come into play that the president could enact to further his vision or his goals?
Yeah, if nothing else, this administration has been very creative in the use of trade tools. I mentioned earlier the issue of currency manipulation. You also notice that sometimes the president just issues proclamations, just says, this is what I'm going to do. This is an executive order. And even though it may not appear to be lawful, by the time it gets to the courts, it's 6 months later, et cetera, it's decided. So I find if he is frustrated by the courts, he will seek to circumvent the courts and come up with another way to do the same thing. So I think this is going to be a long, difficult ride until enough of the U.S. business community, including powerful players that have, well, for example, Elon Musk used to have his ear because Elon has a lot of product in China. He's not a good example, but you've seen that, already for 301 that Tim Cook and Apple got a pass on some of their product. And so it's highly personalized and highly transactional oriented, but it's going to be unpredictable, I think, for the rest of this administration.
And you talk about all the different quivers that the president has. You talk about all the different trade cases that's going on. I got to ask John, that your phone's got to be ringing off the hook. This has to be good for business for you.
Yeah, well, we practiced this answer and question answer earlier, everybody, so just so you know, because everybody's surprised at my answer. The answer is it's causing a lot of short-term work, but it's not. It's frustrating as a lawyer actually to be able to have to talk to the Spungans and their team and go, guys, this is what our best guess at this time. And by the way, tomorrow our observations and our advice become obsolete. That's not really fulfilling. Now, most people think the lawyers don't care about fulfilling, they care about money. Fair enough. But in the short term, it's causing us more work. But at the end of the day, trade lawyers depend upon trade. And we view the uncertainty that this is causing is going to reduce the amount of imports into the United States. Some people cannot sustain 95% tariffs or 100% tariffs or 50% tariffs, depending on the industry. I think trade is going to go down. And if trade goes down, that's bad for businesses and frankly, and it's bad for trade lawyers and customs lawyers because there's simply less trade going on. So it's a short-term boon, but it's something we prefer not to have.
Yeah, and the volatility is certainly interesting. We had this great script written and this plan for the webinar, and we came in this morning and we read all the news headlines, and I'm like, guys, we just got to rip it up. We're going to have to wing it today just because it seems like every day there's something else. And that's one of the reasons why we all wanted to bring everyone in and to have this webinar is we got to talk about more than the headline. We got to talk about the meat and potatoes. We got to talk about what's going on, how it affects PEER Chain, how we present that to our customers, and how we communicate what's going on so that they can operate business with some sort of consistency and reliability instead of, ship it today because the tariff's done, or, should I wait 6 months for an order? Should I give you the order right now? And that's another one that goes into your question to the quiver. That's a great question, John. Should I be waiting to give PEER orders, or, is this going to be all settled in 6 months?
I think depending on the country, some of them are, obviously Brazil is at an unsustainably high level. Vietnam has signed an agreement, or in theory signed an agreement with the United States that sets their reciprocal tariff at 20%. That seems to be the bottom that we've seen so far. I think that some countries will get below that 20%, and that will probably be the European Union, and I think ultimately maybe Canada and Mexico, because they are our biggest trading partners other than, let's say, China. So I think that they will come down. If you're trying to make a decision now as to whether to move a product, to move part of your production facility to a Southeast Asian country, I think you almost need to wait until the dust settles. And because right now it's still pretty high again, but it sounds like 20% might be the bottom for a lot of countries.
Thank you, John. And my question for you, Kevin, goes into, we're talking about how we're interpreting and we're handling all this news, but how are you presenting it to the customers? How are you having the discussions with them around the trade and what we're experiencing?
Yeah, because it does have an impact on their business. And we share the tariff tables and, most importantly, the effective dates. So oftentimes customers are experiencing a price increase that's due to the tariffs and duties that are being applied to their product. So this isn't an arbitrary decision that PEER is making to just say, we're going to go up X amount. We're factoring in what is the tariff, what are the associated costs with managing that tariff to get our customers the most competitive value package that we can, given the volatility of the current environment, which is challenging. We got to admit, the headlines provide so much distraction that keeping them focused on implementation date and the facts of what we know are critical.
The problem that I see out there is that because this has become so complicated to keep track of things, and a lot of people are not used to having this sort of volatility. A lot of people are not always the importer of record; they're just simply customers, right? And so they're making a lot of decisions, I think, based upon anecdotal evidence and what they see in the newspapers, rather than the facts. But getting to the facts is that easy, and when you have kudos to PEER there for trying to be as transparent as possible, because in order for you to explain to your customers why you need to do something, you yourself need to know all of the facts. And frankly, an educated customer is going to be your best friend, because if they think you're just trying to pass along 100% tariffs for no reason, they're going to think you're just being dishonest about it. But transparency is key in this market, because the other companies are not going to be transparent, and they're going to try to make money out of it. And that's the exact wrong thing to do for a long-term business relationship in any industry, with whether it's yours or the legal industry.
Yeah, you hit on a big note on that Transparency Act and what we're trying to do, and that's just it. When we were planning really at the beginning of the year, we had an idea that tariffs were going to happen, but we thought we would get 30, 60, 90-day notice. What was unexpected and what's been more challenging for us to happen as of recent is now it went from 30 days in March, right? We had a 30-day window for IEEPA and all those things going in, to the most recent, it's days. You got 48 hours to react. Well, I've got millions of dollars of product on the water shipping to our facility, and now we have to have conversations with our customers like, hey, this is the prices, the costing. It's very challenging to manage. So that's where we're really trying to lean into that transparency. This is what we're experiencing. This is what it happens. This is a story why, and really trying to own that narrative to help them digest or understand the situation we're all in.
If you had asked me when Trump came to office whether he would eliminate the time, it's been a tradition among all presidents that when they issue these proclamations, and Biden was very protectionist in his own right, and he issued proclamations and raised some duties, but they usually would give you time. Either if anything, something was on the water, they would give you safe harbor there. I've seen in the solar industry where you could prove that you had a contract that had already been signed, you could safe harbor those in. But this idea of giving you 48 hours notice or even less is just something which has never been done before. And frankly, it's so illogical. All you do is make everybody angry, and it really doesn't really do anything to help the economy other than, well, actually it hurts the economy. This is why I think this is an emotional reaction, probably driven in part by Peter Navarro's role in this, is that he just hates imports, and he thinks people who import shouldn't be doing.
And John, you tapped into a really important thing there, is that level of frustration. The customers don't have that certainty of being able to get a definitive statement of what it is at a given point in time. So the customers' feelings are really echoing your sentiments.
And your customers are also feeling the same as that, because it flows all the way down,
Yes. Well, John, you've given us so much information. It's really a lot to digest. And Drew and Kevin asked a lot of good questions. We do have a couple of questions that we wanted to ask you from our audience, and we've got a few minutes for that. So the first question that I wanted to bring from the audience is I think it's a very simple question, but it may not be a simple answer. And that is, what is a duty versus a tariff? What's the difference between a duty and a tariff?
Well, duty typically is going to be like your normal customs duty that you pay for every product. Every product has a classification, and each classification has a duty rate. That's typically what we mean by a duty, and some fees and taxes. Tariffs typically are applied to words like 232, 301, IEEPA. I'll be honest, even within law firms, we use them pretty interchangeably, because I just view that, and when you looked at your chart at the beginning, there's a cumulative tariff or cumulative duty. It doesn't really matter what you call it. It's the same thing. You're paying money.
Okay.
Sometimes for purposes of the law, there may be some hair splitting in some certain circumstances for us as lawyers in defending it. But for the normal consumer and importer, It's just money, duty or a tariff.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. We had another question, and from someone who just said, "How do I know what tariffs apply to my product?"
Well, first off, I think you need to know exactly what the tariff classification is. And so you'd be surprised the amount of large corporations with big in-house staff who consistently make mistakes with their tariff classifications. It's because somebody from 10 years ago said this is the classification and it hasn't been reviewed. So the way you know is by looking, if you have the ability to do so, to look at the tariff classification descriptions in the what's called the harmonized tariff system, and that's usually found on the United States International Trade Commission website. There's various places to look at it. You look at your product, you look at the website and see, is this the closest thing I have? But the reality is it's kind of tough. So when a client asks us to tell them the tariff classification, we look, if it's kind of evident, we do some searching and find this is likely it. But then we go to the customs website where they discuss all these rulings, because the rulings are going to be dispositive. So something that to us and actually to a normal consumer may look pretty obvious. Well, we fall within this. Well, you may not, because especially when you're talking about parts of something, because there are parts that can be easily defined in two different directions, as a part or basically just by itself as a steel part of a steel section or something. So it's rarely super easy, but with a little experience, most companies get the ability to do 90% of the work in-house, and then for the hard stuff, they usually go outside.
Okay. Well, and that gets to one of our other questions. You mentioned the HTS codes. And so how does someone look up those HTS codes? They go to the customs website?
Really, what we do usually is we go to the U.S. International Trade Commission's website. They're the ones who keep it. But the reality is, if you Google, if you Google, you can find a lot of places that pretend to do it. We tend to go to the ITC because that is where International Trade Commission, because they're the ones who actually make the changes in the tariff classifications. And every time there's one of these new laws out there, 232, 301, it creates sometimes a double classification. We have one classification for the product and then a double, meaning that you have to pay the 30% or the 20%. So the easiest way is to go to the tariff website at the International Trade Commission. There's other sources, but you just need to make sure it's as up to date as possible. But then you also just need to make sure that you are positive. You have all the facts about what goes into your own product that you're importing. All right.
Yeah, this is not a time for guesswork or for getting close enough.
Sometimes the number of imported products is so large that even companies with big budgets and like to hire lawyers, they can't send out 1,000 different products to be classified. It's just impossible from a practical and financial point of view. So what we try to do is say, give us the top 10 imports you have that have the biggest financial impact on you. Let us look at those, and then we'll help you yourself determine the HTS for all the classification for all the other minor products.
Very good. Very helpful. Thank you. Well, we have just a few minutes left, and again, we've had a lot of good information. John, thank you for all of this good stuff, and to Drew and Kevin as well. I'd like to bring in two special guests right now, and that is Danny Spungen and Glenn Spungen, two of the four principals in PEER Chain, and they have some closing remarks for us. So there are some familiar faces. Danny and Glenn, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, good morning to our beloved customers. We did this for you, really. And I want you to know I have an apology. I'm not Tom Cook. And I don't have tricks in my bag, in my pocket, for like our administration does. But I do have, and we have, John Gurley. And just for your reference, this is being recorded. There's some very important slides in this presentation. You get passed along to your folks. It's pretty easy, simple slides, and I think they're important. And I think I have to also apologize for this word transparency, because it's so frustrating to be transparent. It's so frustrating. It's just, I can't describe it. But on a personal level, I do have a lot of opinions, and I welcome you to call me anytime. And if I could do one plug, yeah, we're messed up, but I do like gold. So, if you want to balance your inventory, you want to balance something, I got a lot of friends in the industry, and we think a little bit of gold right now is not a bad thing. Me personally, I stay out of crypto. But let me get Glenn in here.
I would say NVIDIA stock, but that's a different story. Real quickly at the end, one thing I would say, what an excellent webinar. This was fantastic. You have John Gurley, who is the expert in this industry. As for PEER Chain, we've been in business since 1969. We've been through these types of crises before. We get through it. And again, communication with the customer is the key. Thank you.
John, give us a last word. Please reconfirm you're not representing Tom Cook. Although I don't blame you. If you take him on, you could dump me, I guess. But
I cannot reveal all of my clients, but I can tell you.
Okay. I do think
kind words.
Going back
Dan,
to the customers. Oh, go ahead, John.
I said thank you for the kind words. You're probably overestimating my skills, but the good thing I have a lot of top quality lawyers around me. So. But part of being a good lawyer is, and what the Spungans have done is try to have long-term relationships with their customers, right? Their problems and their issues. One of the benefits of having known Danny and Glenn and the Spungan family for over 30 years, I have a pretty good sense of what their business priorities are and how they do business. And I like working with a company that tries to do the right thing.
But it's hard. It's hard being transparent right now. And quite frankly, I don't know how other companies are paying these tariffs. We have no debt. I just don't know how they're doing. We're paying a lot of money, but I got to tell you, a lot of money for these tariffs, and we're paying it up front. I don't know how other companies are doing it, but the good news for you, our beloved customers, we're okay. We're going to make it through the storm. It's going to be brutal, but we're going to make it.
Key is communication. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Kevin, for that. I got my bodyguard here to protect us. Where's the last word?
We have just
John?
a couple of minutes left, and I'm wondering if there are any other questions that we haven't asked you that perhaps we should have, or I'm wondering if your crystal ball is in good working order, if you have any idea maybe what we can expect a little bit down the line.
I found that my crystal ball has been breaking about every other day. On the other hand,
it's pretty hard on prognosticating devices, isn't it?
I think this 90 trade deals in 90 days, of course, is proven to be a pure fiction. I think inevitably there is going to be a bit more certainty as the months roll on, just because people simply can't take it. And I think Trump himself will move his attention to a different subject. Companies are going to have to be a little bit patient to try to ride through this storm. It's always going to be unpredictable, but I do think as each country negotiates some sort of deal with the administration, there will be more certainty. Hopefully one of these lawsuits will work, but I wouldn't bet on any of them working at this juncture right now. They may, but I wouldn't make a business decision based upon you're going to be saved. I would just say stay alert and keep open to the possibilities of knowing that you need to keep your own customers alert to the fact that things could change very quickly. And the prognostication is I think it will slow down the volatility, but it's going to be, I think, a few months before we get all this ironed out, at least with these reciprocal tariffs, which are the ones that are the most damaging right now for most countries.
Good advice. Thank you. Well, folks, we're getting toward the very end of the webinar, and I just want to let you know that there will be another webinar in the series, the 5th webinar, and it's going to deal on globalization versus regionalization. We've talked about tariffs and how that's made us expedite what we're doing and thinking, but the question now is, are we winning at home? So that will be the topic of the 5th webinar, and that date will be announced very soon. So thank you to Danny Spungan, Glenn Spungan, Drew Beadle, Kevin Shrout, and especially thank you to John Gurley for this very informative webinar. I'm Richard Hadden, and I appreciate everyone who has been here today. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.